Are UFOs real? That's a simple question, and it's what I set out to answer when I began researching this speech. But unfortunately, despite my hours spent in front of my computer screen trying to do the research and figuring it out, I was unable to. But what I can do is give you the objective facts and let you guys decide for yourself whether or not you're a believer in unidentified flying objects of extraterrestrial origin, aka UFOs. So, I want everyone to put their hand above their shoulder like this. Cross it to your opposite hip. Good thing you guys just buckled your metaphorical seatbelts because we're going for a ride. So, you're about to learn about 3 fascinating UFO tales. One that's been completely debunked, one that's partially a mystery, and one that's anyone's guess. So, we begin in a little town called Roswell, New Mexico, which I'm sure no one here has heard of. So, according to a detailed editorial by B.D. Gildenberg from a science education magazine called Skeptic, and 2 articles by William J. Broad of the New York Times, this is how the tale unfolded. On July 4th of 1947, rancher Mac Brazel went to go check on his sheep when he found on his ranch a giant pile of metallic debris. Sticks, foil, tape, all sorts of weird stuff. Here's a look at it right there. So, soon news broke to the community and to the paper, and people started speculating about flying saucers and aliens. A few days later, the Air Force released a statement that it was just a weather balloon, which no one really bought because that didn't look very much like a weather balloon. So, are you guys convinced of aliens yet? For this particular case, you shouldn't be. In 1994, the Pentagon released formerly classified information about a project run in New Mexico in the 1940s doing espionage on Russia called Project Mogul. And it involved balloons with sensors and radar reflectors. And the description of these devices matched the debris found in Roswell almost perfectly. So as it turns out, it wasn't a saucer or a weather balloon that Brazel found, it was a crashed espionage device. Some people are still suspicious, but this case has most people settled. According to B.D. Gildenberg, a meteorologist who personally worked on Project Mogul, Roswell is the world's most famous, most exhaustively investigated, and most thoroughly debunked UFO claim. For our next case, we go below the equator to Brazil. The facts for this portion were sourced from former astronaut Paul Hill in his book Debunking UFOs and Frederick Wanman in the Scientific R&D magazine. So, in September of 1957, Brazilian newspaper columnist Ibrahim Sued received a strange letter in the mail, in which the letter writer described being on a fishing boat in the Ubatuba Bay and seeing a 2-foot-wide metallic saucer zipping across the sky and exploding into a million pieces. But what separates this UFO claim from others is that the writer of the letter was able to collect some of the fragments from the explosion and send them along to Sued. So Sued sent these metal fragments to the official Brazilian government laboratory for mineral analysis, where some bizarre findings ensued. For one, the scientists found that the fragments were 100% pure magnesium with no trace elements, which is weird because all metals on Earth have trace elements. It's impossible not to. And, in addition to that, the fragments were 6% heavier than they should be, which is well beyond experimental error. Basically, this metal that they found was impossible, and experts were absolutely baffled. Furthermore, 3 independent tests of at this laboratory confirmed these findings. So, there's still a couple reasons to remain skeptical. For one, the tests completely destroyed the material, so they couldn't be replicated at any other laboratory. And for another, the observer was never identified because the signature on the letter that Sued received was unreadable and it never came forth. So we were unable to contact the original viewer of the UFO. So the case of the Ubatuba magnetism remains a little bit mysterious. Next up, we're talking about the Foo Fighters. So, not the band the Foo Fighters, but the World War II Foo Fighters. And the information comes from Zoe Krasny of the Smithsonian publication Air and Space magazine, Jeffrey A. Lindell of the scientific publication Skeptic and a Time magazine article from 1945. So, imagine it's November of 1944, and you're an Allied pilot flying above Germany. And suddenly you look out your window and see a bunch of glowing orbs of light following your airplane. As it turns out, this is exactly what happened to pilots in World War II. This is a real image up on the screen. So, pilots and aircrew would report seeing balls of light seemingly in formation with their plane and following them intelligently, but they couldn't be maneuvered or shot down. They didn't appear on radar, and they didn't have any of the characteristics of normal jets. And so these eventually became termed Foo Fighters because the Allied forces thought it was a German psychological weapon. But the plot thickens when it was found out that German and Japanese pilots reported the same types of sightings, strange, uncatchable flying orbs. In fact, from 1942 to 1945, hundreds of these sightings were reported. The CIA even convened a panel of 6 top scientists in experimental aviation technology to investigate these, but they were unable to produce a conclusion. So, it's been blamed on electromagnetic discharge from the airplane wings, or just said to be in the pilot's head, but in reality, no one really knows what caused the mystery Foo Fighter lights. So, as you guys can see, the answer to the question I posed at the beginning of are UFOs real doesn't really have a black and white answer. And in fact, it doesn't have an answer at all. Because while one UFO can be entirely explained to most people's satisfaction, like the Project Mogul debris in Roswell, explanations for another, like the Foo Fighter lights of World War II, may elude us entirely. And then, of course, there's some in between, like the Ubatuba magnesium fragments in Brazil. So, at the end of the day, the decision is entirely up to